After the success of Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series in the 1990s, DC was pushed to create an animated show for the Justice League. Starring Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter, Hawkgirl, The Flash, Wonder Woman, and Jon Stewart's Green Lantern, Justice League was developed by Bruce Timm and aired between 2001 and 2004. Though it only ran for 2 seasons, it was quickly followed up with Justice League Unlimited, which is set 3 years after Justice League. Both shows, though aimed at children, have some pretty messed up moments, which will have you wondering what the creators were thinking. Let's take a look at 10 of those twisted moments today, and before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe this video if this is your jam as much as it is ours. Hawkgirl puts Solomon Grundy out of his misery. In the episode titled Wake the Dead, students from Louisiana University perform a magic ritual to get back at their bullies. The ritual gets botched and they end up summoning Solomon Grundy back from the dead. Solomon Grundy, now just a shell of his former self and filled with rage, begins attacking the city. The Justice League soon arrives to sort the issue out, but they're no match for Grundy's brute strength. Hawkgirl, who had distanced herself from the Justice League after the Thanagarian invasion, arrives on the scene and asks for a chance to save Grundy, as she and Grundy used to be friends of a sort. Solomon Grundy, however, doesn't listen to her and slams her through a wall. She realizes that her friend is suffering and decides to put him out of his misery with her mace. Despite being so angry, Grundy recognizes her for a brief moment and she asks him to close his eyes. Imagine being a parent and explaining to your child why Hawkgirl decided to kill her friend. It's not just that, as even the concepts of life after death and resurrection are complicated topics that children will have a hard time grasping. This episode ends with Hawkgirl being allowed back into the Justice League and people greeting her with both boos and cheers. The death of a child. Bruce Wayne, old and suffering from kidney failure, needs a tissue donor. Terry McGinnis has himself tested and finds that he's a perfect match. Curious, he has his DNA tested, which tells him that he's Bruce's biological son. He breaks into the house of Amanda Waller and confronts her. She reveals to him that the child metahuman Ace had been causing havoc, and Batman agreed to take her out using a weapon specifically designed to kill her by Cadmus. Batman never meant to use it though, and Ace, who is suffering from a brain aneurysm, dies peacefully holding Batman's hand. This incident pushed Waller to create Project Batman Beyond, which aimed at creating a Batman after Bruce's death. She stole Batman's DNA and found the perfect couple to have his child, Warren and Mary McGinnis, who resembled Bruce's parents. Waller even tried to have Terry's parents murdered, but the assassin backed out. In a cruel twist of fate, Warren was killed, and Terry was motivated to put on Batman's mask. Waller tells him that DNA doesn't make him Batman, but his compassion for his fellow man does. She advised him to keep his loved ones close, and taking this advice seriously, he reconciled with Bruce Wayne. Ace's death is a really dark element of this episode, titled Epilogue, and as a villain or not, she was still just a kid. The Justice League's heroes facing their inner demons. John Dee, a convict at Strikers Island Penitentiary, volunteers to try out the Materiopticon, a device that helps users with extrasensory perception. One day, a riot breaks out, and Dee breaks into the lab during it to use the device at full power. Many also escape during the riots, and it's up to the Justice League to recapture all of them. Meanwhile, Dee adopts an alter ego named Dr. Destiny, as the device granted him telepathic abilities. His first victim is his wife Penny, who left him for another man. He terrifies her in her dreams and she's unable to wake up. Martian Manhunter and Batman find out about Penny and they expect Dee to come after the Justice League next. They're right, as the sleeping members of the League are all enveloped in their worst nightmares. Superman, The Flash, and Jon Stewart imagine their powers increasing so much that they're alienated from their loved ones, while Hawkgirl dreams of being buried alive in a coffin. Martian Manhunter brings his teammates out of their nightmares, while Batman battles Dee by singing Frere Jacques over and over again to save himself from Dee's psychic powers. Dee tries to stab Batman with a sedative injection, but ends up injecting himself. Mental breakdowns and psychological issues are topics that even adults find themselves wrong about, so exposing children to these topics, and not to mention the psychological torture that Dee employs, is not a great idea. The death of Superman. In Hereafter, the 45th and 46th episodes of Justice League, a group of villains band together to attack the Justice League. In the ensuing fight, Toyman aims his disintegrator beam at Batman and Wonder Woman. To save them, Superman throws himself in front of them and disappears. Everyone believes that Superman is dead, except for Batman, who begins an investigation to look for him. In reality, Superman was on Earth 30,000 years in the future. Seeing the Earth barren and desolate, he wanders around until he meets Vandal Savage. Savage tells him that after Superman disappeared, he stole white dwarf star matter from Ray Palmer and used it to create a superweapon that killed the entire Justice League. The weapon didn't stop there and wiped out humanity as a whole, leaving Savage all alone. Superman attacks him in a rage, but stops when he realizes that he's immortal and remorseful. Together, they build a machine, and Superman leaves for the present with instructions from Vandal on how to stop his past self. The Justice League, who wanted to fill the void left by Superman's death, filled it with the crazy and reckless Lobo. But Superman arrives, fires him, and sends the Justice League to stop Vandal. Back in the future, Vandal observes the ruins around him slowly fading, and civilization makes an appearance. Hereafter is divided into 2 episodes, and the first episode convinces you that Superman is dead and Batman's losing it. Try explaining that to a 7-year-old who just wanted to watch his favorite hero fight supervillains. The excruciating death of Tala. One of the most painful deaths that Justice League aired is that of Tala, the powerful sorceress. She was initially part of Cadmus, but while dealing with Felix Faust, he trapped her in his magical prison. The intelligent ape Grodd released her, and they became romantically involved. But Grodd isn't her one true love, and as soon as Lex Luthor gets rid of him, she pledges her allegiance to him. Though she doesn't approve of it, she helps Luthor track down Brainiac. She soon gets bored with him and returns to Grodd, who was held as a prisoner. Luthor, however, had foreseen this situation and subdued her using a magic amulet. Tala begged for forgiveness, but Luthor trapped her in a contraption to use her as a Brainiac replacement. As the machine pulls from her powers painfully, she dies screaming, unable to withstand the excruciating pain. Tala's entire storyline is completely unhinged. The show hints at bestiality in her relationship with Grodd and gives her one of the most disturbing deaths of the franchise. President Luthor's horrific death. In an alternate reality, the Justice League is called the Justice Lords. Due to the schemes of Lex Luthor in this reality, the Flash is killed, and Superman and co. are forced to take drastic measures to maintain peace. He storms the Oval Office and informs President Luthor that he'll be arrested for his crimes. Luthor begins to taunt the Kryptonian, telling him that Superman can never put an end to him. Pushed over the edge, Superman uses his heat vision to burn Luthor to death. It only escalates from there as the Justice Lords suppress free speech, ban elections, and lead an authoritarian regime, all in the name of keeping peace. Justice Lord Batman finds out about the reality where the Justice League exists and decides to take over the world as he believes they'd be better off with the Justice Lords. They arrive, imprison the Justice League, and begin lobotomizing and suppressing their foes. Lord Batman acts as the League's warden and tells them that they haven't been pushed enough to consider their methods of dealing with villains, revealing that the death of the Justice Lord's Flash affected them all deeply. Flash, realizing that there might be a soft spot in Batman's heart for him, fakes his own death and helps his fellow heroes escape. They team up with Luthor and drain the power of the Justice Lords, saving Earth with benevolence. The unhinged brutality of Superman in this episode is truly nightmare fuel. Aquaman's sacrifice for his son. After a patrolling U.S. Navy submarine crashes into Atlantis, the Justice League organizes a search and rescue. Seeing Aquaman's discomfort with the whole ordeal, Superman urges him to visit a conference of world leaders to air out his grievances. Though not super enthused with the idea, Aquaman attends the conference and demands that the world leaders stop polluting the oceans. They vehemently disagree, and as Aquaman is about to leave, he's hit with a bazooka. The assassin turns out to be Deadshot, who was paid with Atlantean gold for the job. Back in Atlantis, Orm takes over the throne and declares war against the surface world. When Aquaman returns, he chains him to the bottom of the ocean floor next to a lava fissure with his son and uses the Trident's blast to force some outcroppings down into the fissure. Aquaman frees one of his hands, but the other is tightly chained, so he uses the metal buckle of his Aquaman belt to cut his hand off. Freed and without his left hand, Aquaman returns to Atlantis and charges at Orm, who falls to his death in the end. With his son's future in mind, Aquaman starts developing diplomatic relations with the surface world. Desperate times do call for desperate measures, but we hope to God that no child is tempted to copy this stunt. The horrors of Vandal Savages reign. Episodes 24 through 26 of Justice League belong to a storyline called The Savage Time and tell the story of an alternate timeline where Vandal Savage helped the Axis powers win World War II. In this timeline, Batman's parents were vocal critics of the fascist regime and were executed for their bravery. Meanwhile, Vandal Savage, a technical genius, impressed the Nazis so much with his weapons that they made him their new leader and had Adolf Hitler cryogenically frozen. The fascist regime's violent means of retaining power is truly something that no child needs to know about in an ideal world. The government's military force is filled with trigger-happy cops and soldiers who open fire at the smallest of provocations. This can be seen at the very beginning when Flash cracks a joke and the Nazis all fire at him and his fellow superheroes. The Allied powers are seen still trying to defy fascism, as they are constantly battling them, but Vandal Savage's superweapon, War Wheels, is the secret of the Axis. In the end, the Justice League teams up with the Blackhawks, a squadron of ace fighters, and defeats Vandal Savage. With the help of a time portal, they return to their own time and tell Batman of the adventure they had. Though the violence of the series isn't so much to be considered gory or even realistic, the very topic of war and Nazis might be a bit too much for kids. The Poisoning of Hawkgirl. Green Lantern gets some unexpected help from Hawkman as he helps him nab the Gentleman Ghost with an nth metal reinforced net. Lantern thanks him, but Shadow Thief witnesses this interaction and starts scheming. Lantern later makes a comment about Hawkman to Hawkgirl, calling him her crazy ex. The next day, Shadow Thief sets his plan in motion and captures Green Lantern. To help defeat Shadow Thief, she visits Hawkman in the Midway City Museum. Shadow Thief attacks them once more and they come into contact with Absorbacron, which triggers an ancient memory. The Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Hawkman were part of a tragic love triangle in another life in ancient Egypt. Qatar and Shi'ara Hol were royalty in Egypt, and Shi'ara cheated on her husband with Bashari, a military leader in their kingdom. Qatar's priest, Hath Set, spied on the cheaters and promptly reported back to Qatar, who exclaimed that he wanted them poisoned. Though this was an angry statement with no truth behind it, Hath Set took it as an order and fed Shi'ara and Bashari poisoned wine. The heartbroken king drank the poisoned wine as well. The Shadow Thief tells him that he was born from the deepest desires of Carter Hall, aka Hawkman, who is the reincarnation of Qatar. Shi'ara was reincarnated as Shi'ara Hall, or Hawkgirl, while Bashari was reincarnated as John Stewart, the Green Lantern. Shadow Thief asks Carter to kill John so Shi'ara will be his forever, but Carter denies, as he believes that he'll find a partner on his own terms and not on Fate's. Though Shadow Thief is defeated in this episode, the Romeo-Juliet-esque murder-suicide isn't something you'd want your child to know about. The torture of the Question. Question is the resident crackpot of the Justice League, and there's not much of a doubt about it. Despite his many crazy conspiracy theories, he's valued by the other superheroes. Batman, realizing that Question can make a connection between any two entities or topics easily, asks him to find the link between Project Cadmus and the villain Lex Luthor. During the investigation, he starts crushing on Huntress, who offers to help him in exchange for the location of Stephen Mandragora, the man who murdered her parents. She helped Question break into a Cadmus terminal and steal high-security files. The files mostly contained Amanda Waller's simulations, but he also got his hands on a file detailing the Justice Lord's reality. Unfortunately, Question begins to believe that it is just a reality that hasn't happened yet, as Waller's simulations had pretty spot-on predictions. So, Question decides to go kill Luthor himself and prevent Superman from the murder, but Luthor is way too powerful, and Question ends up in captivity. He's handed over to Dr. Moon, who tortures him, asking him about the location of the missing files. Though Question doesn't break and keeps replying with deranged conspiracy theories, the torture scene is sure to leave an unsavory taste with the viewer. Marvelous verdict! All this violence and death makes you wonder if the writers were really thinking of kids when writing this show. Did we miss any disturbing details that you remember from Justice League or Justice League Unlimited? Clue us in down in the comment section below and make sure to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. We'll soon be back with more amazing videos, but until then, take care and have a marvelous day.